Hello and welcome to Success is Never Accidental. I'm Lynn Payton. I'm passionate about helping individuals and organisations to get better outcomes and to feel more fulfilled. And it's my belief that strong leadership is the key to success in any endeavour or any agency. And on this podcast, I get to interview some highly successful leaders across all sectors and internationally so that you can learn more about their formula for success and identify some of the common factors. But nothing changes without action. So each episode includes a challenge to you to reflect, evaluate, decide, and to act. In other words, to do something differently going forward. I'm very excited today because my guest, Erin Patchell, is a Canadian business coach and the founder of Positivist Group. I'm going to get her to share that one with us. A social enterprise that helps build inclusive teams and purpose-driven organizations. With a background in systems thinking, design, and coaching psychology, she supports leaders and change makers as they navigate complex changes. Erin works with startups, nonprofits, and public sector teams across Canada, helping them lead with clarity, build trust, and create lasting impact. Erin is passionate about the intersection of leadership, learning, and sustainable growth. And importantly, she believes that culture is not just a reflection of leadership, but the root of transformation. So that's certainly one of the things we're going to explore with her today. So please help me welcome Erin Patchell. Erin, I'm so excited to have you with us today. You and I had a fascinating conversation last week, and I know this is going to be an amazing podcast. So, how are you this morning?
I'm wonderful. I think it's going to be a bit of a rainy weekend, but I'm here for it. I love the rain. I love everything. Life is beautiful. Thanks for having me, Lynn.
So, tell us where you're joining us from today.
I'm joining you from just outside of Ottawa, Ontario, in Canada.
Awesome, awesome. So, Erin, I start by telling us a little bit about your organization and the amazing work that you do.
Positivist Group, yep. Positivist Group is a startup, so it's been around for about 3 years now, just coming up to our third-year birthday. We're a social enterprise, a women-owned business, a disabled-owned business, and we believe that organizations can have both purpose and profit. We don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So we help purpose-driven or visionary businesses and visionary entrepreneurs grow their businesses in a way that retains their strong values.
Fantastic. And I love something I read on LinkedIn. One of your comments was that you're a professional problem solver.
That's right.
So, what do you find are some of the common issues that people need support with
Just in general, organizationally,
organizationally?
yeah. I mean, right now we're in a really interesting time, economically, politically, and socially. And so things are moving really fast. We're sort of in the middle of a few different sort of revolutions in a way. And so because things are changing really fast, the way that we used to do things isn't really working for a lot of organizations. That doesn't, whether you're in government, whether you're nonprofit, or whether you're private sector, really it's about learning how to learn faster right now. And
Mhm.
so we're trying to support organizations in developing those systems, the structures, and the mindset and the leadership and the culture. The culture is extremely important so that they can learn the things that they need to learn and build safe spaces where people can feel like they can learn, right? And then actually implement what they've learned into a system that makes sense, that's not going to put undue stress on the entire organization, but moves it forwards towards a goal, right? And so that's the thing I think, that is very challenging right now. It puts a lot of stress on the system is, organizations are afraid of losing revenue or they're struggling with revenue. They're struggling with a lot of stress amongst their team members. I don't know anyone who's not going through some kind of personal crisis. I'm at that age now where, people are getting sick, where, children are they have children or they're caring for aging parents. or both. Women are, hitting menopause or perimenopause. And we have a lot of more information about a lot of these personal, challenges sometimes. There's very little separation now between work and personal life, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
now we're dealing with that as well. And so there's a lot of pressure on leaders and there's a lot of pressure on organizations and people. So how do you help?
And really, it is, as you say, it really needs to bring out the strongest leaders in order to balance all of those competing demands. You do a lot of work on culture. Start by just helping us define what culture means in organizations.
Culture is really the fabric that holds everything together moving forward in that positive direction, right? It is the culmination of all of the beliefs, the actions, um, the the curiosity that you have as a team as a whole, wanting to get to know each other, wanting to support each other, having that trust, having that psychological safety, being able to speak out and say, here, there's a problem, let's fix it, that's all part of culture. And right now, we talk a lot about coaching culture in our organization or learning cultures. So we're more focused on developing these types of cultures. But organizations can have, all different kinds of cultures that work for them. But really, it is about defining what is the kind of culture you need and what is the behaviors, competencies, belief systems, and how can we work together to make that strong, to build those connections within the organization? What are the rituals, the artifacts that you need within the organization?
And values come into it as well, and totally how people define their values, because what integrity means to me may mean something to you. But is the real challenge, Erin, that lots of organizations don't have these conversations?
I think that right now it's hard because people are so busy delivering. Organizations have really leaned out. Um, Most of the organizations we work with are, trying to do a lot more with less in a
Mm.
way. And AI obviously is supporting that to a degree. Um, so doing a lot more with less gives them a lot less time to really just pause for a minute and take stock of the current state and how they're actually feeling and sense into the organization. And so I agree. I don't think that that's happening. I don't think it has happened. I think that it is happening less and less, unless there is a very strong intention to take that pause. And I think that's really important.
And so often that pause only comes on the back of a crisis or a major event. And then we have people like you and me, we have to spend so much time then rebuilding confidence, rebuilding self-worth before you can have the conversation. So what's your advice to organizations generally in terms of pressing that pause button a little bit sooner?
It's a system, right? We need to build in the habits. We need to build in the rituals of pause. When we sense that there's some stress, and believe me, there are flags everywhere once you start looking for them. As soon as you see something, pause at an organizational level, at a team level, and at an individual level. So, like for myself as an individual, um, one of my daily habits is to go to the gym, right? I think getting exercise is really important. However you do it, move your body for your psychological well-being and your physical well-being. If there's a day that I'm too busy to go to the gym, that is a flag for me. I've decided, I've intentionally made that a flag that is steering me into a bad direction, right? And if that happens more than once, then it definitely needs to be addressed. And so we need to figure out what are those flags individually, as a team and as an organization that we're going to notice them. And we know that if that thing happens, we need to take a pause and take stock of things and reassess, and maybe pivot. We'll see, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
give me an example from an organizational perspective then of what some of those flags might be.
Well, I mean, hopefully organizations are measuring some things, it's really hard, if we're building organically and sort of grassroots and kind of going with the flow. It can be good for a while, especially when the economy is good. You don't feel like you need to worry about things as much. You have access to great team members. People are generally more happy and, less stressed. So things are kind of working on their own. And then you get to a point of stress, right? And that's when it's really important to start measuring, what is your HR metrics, for example, are really, really important. Talking to your team members. So even the qualitative information. So really actually going and talking to people and seeing how they feel. It's not a bad thing to talk about feelings at work because everybody has feelings. And some of these things you can measure quantitatively and qualitatively at an individual level, team level, and an organizational, many different metrics. Pick a few that are meaningful for your organization, and then make sure that you aren't, that you're benchmarking them and then they're not kind of like drifting away, right? So you got to decide sort of like what you're able to tolerate. And then if it goes past a certain point, then you need to adjust. And hopefully the goal would be to improve each of these over time.
Certainly in the public sector, and you've
Mhm.
done work in the public as well as the not-for-profit and private sector. In the public sector, one of the big flags at the moment is staff turnover,
Oh,
um,
sure.
and staff sickness rates. And those are very obvious and apparent and a real flag that something different needs to happen. What are some of the things that can be built in as habits? I like that word, habits and rituals, to make sure that we are taking action to retain our staff, to keep our workforce happier. And a lot of that's also connected with being on purpose and them feeling that they're doing something worthwhile.
I mean, it often boils down to leadership. I know people say it over and over and over again, right? Every thought leader, every, organizational development consultant, everyone will tell you that a lot of the time it boils down to your leadership and how well your leadership is communicating, being honest and transparent, vulnerable to a point, and authentic. So, do people actually trust you to take them through the hard times because you've demonstrated to them over and over again that you're capable, that you can make decisions and that they understand the decisions that you're making, that they believe that you care about them, right? And that, so leadership, you believe that you care about them, that's demonstrated through your actions. You
Mhm.
know, are you serving your people properly? Is the organization serving its people properly? Um, you know, People don't expect everything. They mostly they want to be respected and listened to, like heard.
And those things don't cost money, Erin.
Oh,
So, what are some of the practical ways that leaders can demonstrate that nurturing and that values aligned kind of culture within limited resources?
within limited resources, there's so many things that you can do as a leader. I mean, respect is costs nothing. Your attitude as a leader costs nothing. Kindness costs nothing. People want to believe that they're cared about. Like if you're a leader and you lead a team of, 10, you have 10 direct reports, let's pretend, which is a fairly large team in most organizations. You should know maybe their kids' names. You should know a little bit about what's going on in their lives. You should know, what their strengths are, what their goals are, what supports them. People want to feel that purpose. Intrinsically, almost everybody wants to grow. Some of them don't know how to, and some people are stuck. And I think that that's a valuable opportunity for coaching, right? And so as a leader, if you can listen, truly listen, get to know people on a level of depth where they
Mhm.
believe that, they are being seen, and they trust you,
Mhm.
because over time you develop that. Um, when you get to those hard moments, you've got to make a tough decision. Maybe it's not aligned perfectly with your values,
Yeah.
but you explain these are the variables that I'm working with. And the most important thing is survival right now. And this is what we have to do in order to achieve that.
Mm.
And they'll say, okay, I get it, because
Yeah.
you've got that consistency, you've built that relationship with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really about the relationship.
And relationships are so, so,
Mm.
so critical. I remember doing team building with a group a few years back, and it was actually a multicultural group. But when I asked simple questions like, well, why did this person come to work in Ireland? The team leader didn't know the answer and they didn't know how many children they had or whatever. So, I mean, regardless of what industry in, we have to know our direct reports as people
Yeah,
first and foremost. And we've got to have boundaries about how much time we talk about that. But at the end of the day, it's leaders know where that balance is, don't they? Sort of just intuitively seem to know. And you can start a conversation for just a couple of minutes. Well, how's your mom doing? I heard she da da da. And then you can get straight in, but you're always going to get a better, more productive kind of workers or manager if there's just that sense that somebody cares about them.
absolutely. Absolutely. Trust goes both ways too, right? You
Mm.
can't expect trust unless you're giving trust to people. And part of that is that's the relationship. The relationship goes both ways, right? And you're not supposed to be friend. You're not friends with your direct reports. Of course not. That's just not how it is, unfortunately. That's the role of a leader is somewhat set apart, and there's a good reason for that.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean you can't build a personal relationship. It's just a different kind of personal relationship.
Yeah. And talking about the relationship then between nurturing your people, growing your people, and also achieving all the organizational goals and performance targets. What's the relationship between those two pieces?
I mean, they're directly correlated, right? The growth of your people, their satisfaction with their job, them leveraging their strengths, having a team that is complementary so that their skills, kind of then their weaknesses sort of balance each other out and they can collaborate appropriately. They've got a good attitude about it because you've built that into the culture. That is all going to steer you to success in an organization. I know it sounds simple. It feels like a little bit magic when it happens, but it happens and we can develop that. We can develop that intentionally.
So
Yeah.
it's so strange, isn't it? Because it is so simple. So why, whenever you and I are working with organizations, do we often find that it's just not happening?
The human being is a complex system. And so, I mean, it is beautiful. Human beings are beautiful, right? Even in our complexity, even sometimes in our messiness, there's something just incredible about the human spirit. And we all have things we're dealing with. We're dealing with things from our past, we're dealing with things from our present, outside of work, inside of work. And so, I know you're an amazing coach, Lynn, and I'm a coach as well, and I lead a team of coaches. And for me, it's really that skill of coaching. It's not just coaching other people, it's also learning to coach ourselves you
Mhm.
know, that I think is incredibly powerful. I'm such a huge proponent of coaching for that reason because it really helps you reframe how you think in a positive direction, and it helps you build that strong, resilient attitude against obstacles as well. And so I think if every person learned this skill, it'd be a lot easier for us as we're working with organizations.
But that whole coaching conversation, whether it's a formal or an informal conversation, is a bit like what I said to you earlier. It's about having a problem solving, solution focused approach, isn't it? So even last night I was coaching in an organization that has suffered some issues recently, and I met with a good part of the staff team last night. But when you get into those conversations of simple questions, well, what needs to happen? What's the
Mhm.
first step? You know, what if you were the boss, what would you do? And then the conversation just flows, and then it's easy, isn't it, to pin it down. Well, what's possible? What's the first step? What'll we feed back? And what, but if you and I just train people all the time to coach rather than tell.
Yeah. And coaching is also like that thought process, the framework of coaching, the mental framework is really about like how can we what is the smallest step that we need to take that we'll actually achieve, right? It's about breaking that down, breaking that what feels like a large problem down into something that is achievable, and then slowly building momentum over time, right? Ah, it's
I
so
love that, Erin. I love
good.
that. Breaking it down to, what did you say, to the smallest possible step that gets a change.
The smallest achievable step. Yeah.
Super. I love that. I love that. So if there are people listening today and they are really intentional leaders and they're feeling a bit stuck in terms of the dynamics of their team at the moment, what are one or two small achievable steps that they could take to strengthen their team?
I mean, I'm going to take a page from the Tao and just tell them to stop and do nothing for starters.
Okay.
You know, for starters, just breathe, take no action at the first step and just observe what's going on. know,
Mhm.
don't jump right into action. I think that's a mistake that a lot of new leaders make, especially. Sometimes it's better just to hold on, and no action is still action, by the way,
Because
right?
it's a decision.
It's a decision. You got it. And so hold back from taking that action and just see how things play out because people are actually more capable a lot of the time than you think they are. And sometimes they can even solve their own problems. Um, that's true.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. If only we
Yeah.
would ask them the questions that allow them to do so.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And if they need a nudge and they, obviously then we need to gather more information. We need to really reflect and see how we can help, in a way that's not completely intrusive. Sometimes when we try to solve a problem, I think that we can make a problem worse. And so
Mhm.
that's not what we want to do, right? So we want to be careful of how we're solving problems, especially right now, because a lot of the time things are a lot more complex than they look at first glance. Yeah. So that's what I'd say to start, but then just listen. Listening is easy, listening is free. And when I say listening, I don't mean just hearing what they're saying. I mean like full body listening, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like listen with your heart. Yeah.
And your gut as well. You know, people overuse their head, don't they? And they don't engage their heart and their gut nearly enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I think those are simple things that people could do just to start.
So we're going to draw a breath first, and then we're going to listen to people on the team and see what's going on. And then what's the next step in terms of maybe moving forward in a
Mhm.
positive way?
It's hard to just say one thing because it really depends on the scenario,
Mhm.
but listening to your team, gathering the information you need, consulting with other stakeholders if necessary,
Mhm.
so you're not loading all the responsibility on your own shoulders. So you
Mhm.
have most people don't realize how many people they have in their kind of circle of trust, the people that, their personal board of directors that they can go to in order to consult and ask those good questions and see, what they should possibly do. So, especially if you're a new leader, probably good to share some of that responsibility in the decision making, find somebody to talk to about it, you know, and then you can figure out what one step is. What is the small achievable step that you can do that's sustainable, right? You don't want a
Mhm.
band-aid. You want something that's going to last a little bit longer.
I love that. I love that. The change has to be sustainable. But but it seems to me like underlying all of that, you're saying that one of the habits has to be regular engagement with the team and
Oh,
regular opportunities to listen.
absolutely. I mean, listening should be a daily activity for any manager, no matter what level you're at.
Mhm.
That's the most important thing, to see reality, right? Otherwise, we are human beings are very good at making assumptions. It's literally how our brain has been designed.
Mhm.
So if you're not seeing that information in front of you, like in 3D, you're going to be missing a lot. You're going to be making a lot of assumptions, and sometimes they'll lead to bad decisions, unfortunately.
Can you give us an example, Erin, of a startup or an organization that you've worked with that actually were able to transform their culture and maybe some of the components of that?
Oh, goodness. Let's see if I can think of a good one. I mean, I'd love to share a story about a family farm that I worked with, actually. And I'm really proud of this project because they were transitioning from, it's a very large family farm in Ontario. They were transitioning from the elder owners who had purchased the farm from their family members. So it had been a generational family farm, and then they had the younger generation wanting, with all the ideas, wanting to come up and, take things over. And basically, we transitioned the culture from this uh, which was it was a very successful farm, but they hadn't put any intention into their culture whatsoever. The younger generation, and I have permission to tell this story, the younger generation had been fighting. They had been the siblings. There was some rivalry between them their entire lives. So it was creating a bit of chaos in the organization. And what we did was we came in and we helped them develop a strategy for the organization, help them transition the younger generation inward, help them build the skills that they needed, the younger two, in order to manage the organization and all of their ideas. And then we coached them through implementing their strategic plan over a process of a year and a half. And through that process, through getting to know themselves, through learning, how hard it really is, to manage a farm, um, and through learning about each other and how each other works as a team, they ended up like the mom literally hugged me and said, "I think you saved my family."
Yeah.
So this is probably one of the more impactful projects I think that I've done, because literally we went from a family who was in a farm. They were on the verge of selling it. They were, very concerned about the future of the farm, to, the future is bright. People are working together. The culture is strengthened because the sons knew, exactly who they were. They started to respect each other. They were working together towards their own goals, like their mutual goals. And then the farm, was thriving essentially, and continues to thrive to this day. This was a couple years ago. So I love that story. I don't know. There's something about working with families, and I think a family is the most complex team you'll ever have.
Your children are still adolescents and younger. Mine are all adults. Let me tell you, I totally agree with you. And everybody's life, because mine are all over the world, has gone in different directions.
Mm.
So it's so interesting. And all the time, I have to keep reminding myself, I need to keep asking them what's
Mm.
going on for them, what's important for them, what would the future hold for them as well. So I think that story was beautiful, because that piece where the mummy said you saved her family, that was the most important outcome of the whole thing at the end of the day. But at the same time, you've helped them to build a sustainable business that is probably going to go to a higher level.
I mean, that's always the goal when we work with organizations, is to help them grow. And I focus on, growth, sustainable growth, because, right now it's kind of, if you're not growing, you're slowly dying, frankly. So, you'll get more opportunities. You'll be able to support your team members better, give them more opportunities, serve your clients better, serve your community better, be more intentional in serving your values, all of those things. They don't happen by themselves. That you have to be growing your business. And I'm talking about the top line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also as individuals, because
Yeah.
businesses are just organisms that are made up by people. And it's the same for people. So if they're stuck in the same job for 15 years, unless they've got a new project or a new goal or whatever, people slowly die as well. And it's the leader's job to make sure that there's opportunities for every single person in the team to grow. And the best way to do that is to really get to know what are they interested in, what are they passionate about, what is their skill set, and how can we get that all aligned so that every day they come home from work feeling like they've made a real contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. If there was one thing you could tell your younger self, Miss Erin, what would it be?
Oh. That's a good question. I've had a very strange, windy path to my career, as you can probably imagine. What would I tell my younger self? It's all good, you
It's
know? It's all good. There's nothing to worry about. You just keep moving forward. Yeah.
That's just super advice. Erin, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all your wisdom and insights.
Yeah, no, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Lynn.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, and you as well.
Well, what a fabulous interview with Erin Patchell. So some of the reflections for me were culture matters and it's a leadership responsibility to promote a positive culture within teams. And what is culture? It's the beliefs, the values, the behaviors, and the actions, and the capacity to adapt to change. She said, as leaders, we have a responsibility to grow our people, and that can best be achieved in the context of a relationship with them that respects them as individuals. People do best when they are on purpose and their skills and strengths and interests are all aligned. Erin said coaching works and it allows people to come up with their own solutions rather than us as leaders always finding the answers. So here's my challenge for you this week. Pause for a moment to reflect on the culture within your team. And that could be a team in work or it could be a team in the community. Observe and listen for a time so that you get a sense of what's really going on. And then together with the team, identify one achievable step to strengthen the team. And remember, success is never accidental. And the word that Erin used consistently during this podcast interviews was intentional.